Hey guys, my name is Lucas Boyd and I'm going to talk to you about the number one sales influencer when it comes to the actual sales process. Arguably, there could be another aspect that would tie with this one, but this is either number one or tied for first. So a little bit about myself. I've been the number one sales rep for multiple different companies. Not just that, but I have also been the top earner. So there's a difference between making a lot of sales and then actually having it reflect in your bank account. And that's why I'm doing these videos, is to sort of be able to help you guys make more money in the field. It's not necessarily about the numbers. It's actually really not about the numbers. It's about helping you reach your financial goals. So that said, the principles that I'm going to be talking about, they don't just come from audiobooks and things I've read. They've actually been used, and these things work, and they've helped me and other people that I've worked with boost their numbers and get to the top of their field. So with that said, let's talk about what the number one influencer is. When it comes to the actual sales process itself, is called trust. No doubt you guys know what trust is, but a lot of people don't know how to build trust, and they're not sure why people aren't trusting them. Trust by far has the biggest impact on whether or not a prospect will buy from you. Put simply, if they don't trust you, they're not going to do business with you. That's just how it is. If you don't believe me, grab a $100 bill. You can go door to door and offer people $100, and you're going to actually get some people saying no. You might want to take a couple hundreds with you because some people are going to say yes, or just take back $100. But honestly, that's how big trust has. A big impact trust has is that they'll question, why are you here? What is that money? Are you trying to get in my home? All kinds of things. So trust has a major impact. The way I'm going to approach the topic is I am going to give you 3 subcategories that have a massive impact on trust, and then I am going to give you points in each of those categories on how you can utilize them to ultimately increase the amount your prospects trust you. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, refer to the diagram, a bit of a pyramid. You got trust, 3 subcategories, and then under that, we're gonna go over points that you can do to improve those subcategories. So with that said, let's jump into number 1. The first aspect that I want to go over with you guys that has a huge impact on whether or not your customer feels like they can trust you is listening. So we all know what listening is. Some of us may struggle with knowing how to show that we're listening, or maybe just listening in general. It can be difficult sometimes to listen, especially in certain situations. But the fact of the matter is, your customer is not going to take your advice or recommendations unless they first believe that you fully understand their situation. And this belief that you understand their situation is going to come from the fact that they feel like they were listened to. They're going to feel that you understand their situation via listening. So it's very important to get this skill down pat. One of my favorite quotes is that, how does it go? Being heard to the heart is like oxygen to the lungs. So this is awesome because in sales, it's very advantageous for us to learn how to provide that oxygen to the lungs per se. If we do that, we're gonna really separate ourselves from the pack, because so many people in today's day and age don't do that. They really don't listen. A lot of people really do just wait for their turn to talk. So yeah, if we're not one of those people, we can really leverage that, and it can really help build a relationship. How do we express that we're actively listening? And that is going to bring me to my first point. The first aspect that I want to go over that has a huge impact on whether or not someone thinks you're a good listener is to ask questions. So really quickly, a lot of people think that listening is sort of a passive state of mind. That's not true. Listening is actually a very active state. Waiting for your customer to finish talking and then just jumping into your service or product or whatever proposal you have is not a good way to show that you're actually listening to them. What you can do is ask them questions. So when you ask someone questions about what they said, you not only show that you were listening to what they were saying, but you show that you care about what they said, that you're not just waiting for your turn to talk. And if somebody feels like you care about what they said, they're gonna know you care about them, and they're gonna feel inclined to trust people that care about them. So that's the big one, is ask questions after your customers finish talking. Now, one of the questions is, if you go to the prospect's business or they come to you, what if they're not talking? How do you get them how do you ask questions if they're not first engaging in conversation? So that actually brings me to point number 2. Encourage people to talk about themselves. Encouraging people to talk about themselves actually takes a lot of pressure off you, so that's one benefit it has. Another one is it makes people feel very good about themselves. Dale Carnegie says that a toothache to someone is more important to them than a famine in China that has killed 1 million people. So people to themselves are the most important people. It's the most important aspect of life, is yourself. When you encourage people to talk about that, they feel really good about themselves. You put them in a positive state. So another benefit to someone being in a positive state is you are way more likely to close sales when people feel good than if they feel bad. Something to keep in mind is people don't remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. So encouraging them to talk about themselves makes them feel really good about who they are, and it puts you in a position where you're able to now ask questions. Potential negatives of this, so if you guys are in sales, you're going to be able to relate to this. Sometimes the sale can get way off track. So one minute you are talking about the product or service, and the next minute your customer is talking about how they were in World War II and how they were a medic, and who knows, the sale goes way off track, and if it gets too far off track, it can be difficult to work it back towards the close. You sort of create a familiar relationship, which also can make the customer feel comfortable just saying no and walking away. Nah, thanks bro, it's not for me, but take my number down. And you don't want to be in a spot like that. So how do you get around that? What you want to do is you want to ask questions or encourage them to talk about things that pertain to the sale. I can give a lot of examples of this, but I'll just give a really basic one. Let's say you're selling shoes. So you go to the business, you bring the shoes. First of all, one mistake salespeople make is by talking about what they have instead of asking the customer what they need. So ask them, what kind of shoes do you have, or what kind of shoes would you like? Do you like your shoes? They say, yeah, I love my shoes. Great. What do you love about your shoes? Well, I like this. Okay, well, what do you not like about your shoes? Well, I don't like this. So when you're doing this, you're encouraging them to talk about themselves. So they get to talk about themselves. You get to ask questions, which shows you actually care. So now they feel good, they feel like you care, plus you are simultaneously working towards the close because you're talking about your product, and what you're doing is you want to fish for a problem you can solve. Eventually they say, well, I love everything about my shoe, but the heel is like blah, it doesn't, whatever. Like, I'm not a shoe expert, but something they don't like about the heel, perfect, maybe your shoe can resolve that problem. If you get this down pat, extremely powerful. Customer feels great about the sale. You were able to ask a lot of questions and learn a lot about them. You showed that you cared, and you move towards the close relatively quickly. You can actually close a lot of deals like this, and it protects you from getting way off track and building a very personal relationship, but talking about things that have nothing to do with why you're there. So that said, that wraps up listening, and I can now jump into point number 2, the second point that has a massive impact on whether or not someone trusts you. The second aspect that I want to go over with you guys that has a massive impact on whether or not someone trusts you is called rapport. Rapport is basically your ability to relate to the customer. If you don't have rapport, you are going to have a difficult time making any kind of business relationship. It's extremely important. It actually almost supersedes everything else in the sale. Rapport is very, very, very important. The way I like to define rapport is that it is the expression of morals and values that your customer deems as important, while understanding and sympathizing with the negative traits or habits that they might struggle with. Question is, how do you do this? How do you appeal to the morals or the good values that they deem as positive? And that brings me to point number 1. The first point I have for you guys that is gonna really help you build rapport is be what they like, not what they are. What do I mean by this? I mean, do not necessarily appeal to their self-image, but focus more so on their self-ideal. Why? Because often who we are isn't who we want to be. We might be in a state of growth, or some of the habits we have aren't things that we are proud of, and they're not things that we would want to do business with. So for example, let's say your customer has stolen something in the past. This is gonna be an obvious example, but let's say they've stolen something in the past. Well, reflecting traits that are consistent with a thief is not going to build trust. You might be pertaining to their self-image, but that might not be who they want to be. Even if that was who they want to be, that's still not going to build trust. So point is, you want to focus on the morals and values that they aspire to have. And a better example of this is what they could be very concerned with global warming. They might really value recycling, never littering. Maybe you can relate to this. Make a point of creating dialogue out of this. Hey, I love recycling as well. I can't stand the fact that people litter. Have you seen what's happening to the polar ice caps? You create conversation and you build rapport now. So first point, and this one's actually very important, make sure that you be who they want to be and not what they are. Okay, I know a lot of people when they're trying to build rapport, sometimes they just reflect everything that they're seeing. Make sure you take into account that maybe the habits that you're seeing aren't things that they are proud of. This next point I have is actually sort of a spin-off from the previous point. It's like a sub-point. Be agreeable, but not too agreeable. So if you're trying to, like I said in the previous point, reflect their self-ideal or who they are, you can potentially come across as flattering, and that's not a good thing. Flattering is not a good thing. Showing appreciation and flattery are very different. So yeah, be agreeable, but not too agreeable. When you agree with everything they're saying, the customer is going to feel like that you're not actually trying to build a genuine relationship. You don't really care about them, and they're going to feel like they're being sold. Nobody likes to feel like they're being sold. So agree with the things that you actually agree with. I'm sure that you can find common ground. So when you find something that you can agree with, make a point of elaborating on that. Talk about that for a while, engage in that, and that's how you're going to build rapport. But don't just jump on every single thing. So the guy's like, or the girl, I love hunting. Oh, great, me too. I love traveling. I like going to Egypt. Oh yeah, me too. Where have you been? Oh, I've been here. Yeah, I also like my favorite color is blue. Me too. Don't do that. That's not a good way to show someone you actually care. It's cheap. It's flattery. So yeah, agreeable, but not too agreeable. Let's jump into point number 3. The third tip I have for you guys that will really help you build rapport, it's related to the definition I gave in the beginning about rapport, and that was you want to reflect the morals and values that your customer deems as positive while being sympathetic and understanding the negative habits or traits that they might struggle with. So point number 3 is be sympathetic. When you do this, it builds a lot of trust. So people are very guarded and fearful of the things that they're not proud of. They tend to be very defensive towards things that they don't want to share, or it comes from a fear of rejection. So if you can get them to open up, this is going to build rapport. They're going to feel like you get them. And a good way to do this is to just be sympathetic, understand them, maybe relate to them. For example, let's say your customer has, let's say they smoke. In point number 2, I talked about being agreeable but not too agreeable. If you're too agreeable, you might say, oh, I love smoking. Well, what if your customer smokes but they hate the fact that they smoke? So in a situation like this, what you want to do is understand them. Hey, I might not struggle with the same habit, or maybe you do, but let's say you don't. I might not struggle with the same habit, but I'm still human. I have these crutches. I have these family members that have struggled with the same thing. I've got this friend, he's been dealing with this for a long time. Whatever it is, when you do this, you're gonna show the customer that you're not judgmental, that you're not categorizing them as something that they're fearful of being categorized as, and they're just gonna feel like you're someone that you're a bit of a safety net, that you're someone that they can go to, you're someone that they can trust. And when you're someone that they can go to and when you're someone that they can trust, they're gonna be a lot more likely to close with you. So that is point number 3, and that actually finishes off my points on how to build rapport, is be sympathetic. There are 3 things. So first of all, rapport is extremely powerful. Like I mentioned earlier, it supersedes almost everything else in the sales process. It's very important to build rapport, extremely hard to close a sale unless you have rapport with your customer. However, that said, there are 3 things that you never, ever want to do in the name of rapport. I'm not going to get into those things in this video, but if you are interested in knowing what those things are, you can click the link below. And that said, let's move on to the 3rd point when it comes to building trust. This is my favorite one. It is also the one that is the least talked about, especially in the sales world. And I'm not sure why, because it just has such a very real impact on not just trust, but your entire life and the entire sales process as well. So that is called congruency. Some of you may have never heard the word before. Others may have heard the word, but maybe you have some misunderstandings that pertain to what congruency really is. And one of those misunderstandings is thinking that congruency is basically staying monotone or being unchanging. This is not true. You can be very dynamic, you can have a very dynamic personality and still be congruent. Even people who might struggle with bipolar, for example, who have extreme ups and downs, they can still be congruent because they are congruently up and down. Okay, so that said, let's talk about the first point that has a major impact on whether or not a customer feels you are congruent. Keep your clothes on. This might seem a little weird. What am I talking about? Keep your clothes on. What I mean, I do not mean to never get changed, and I'm not implying that you would want to get naked when you go see your customers. I don't know what you're selling, but whatever. It has nothing to do with being naked or not naked. It has nothing to do with that. What I'm talking about is maintaining the same kind of style. This might seem trivial or not important, but it actually has a huge impact. Obviously, it's more psychological than anything. If you are at home and you decided to put on a sweater on or change your shoes, you know that doesn't really change who you are, but that's because you know you and the customer does not. And a huge percentage of the customer's paradigm when it comes to you is your physical appearance and what you're wearing. So if one meeting they meet up with you and you're wearing a suit, they're gonna label you a certain way. You're labeled in their mind to having certain characteristics. Now, if you book a second meeting with that person and now you show up in high tops and a leather jacket, obviously that doesn't change who you actually are, but for them it does, because now they have to go through a relabeling process. They labeled you a certain way in the first meeting, and now they have to relabel you. And the fact that they have to relabel you makes them question if they ever really knew you to begin with. And when someone is questioning if they really ever knew you to begin with, then they're not sure if they can even trust you. If we don't even know who this salesperson is, then how can we trust them? So the other thing is during this relabeling process, it's not just your appearance that gets thrown into the mix, it's who you are and the things you said in previous meetings. So often, just because you're wearing something different, you've got to start from scratch, because they decide that they're going to start from scratch in their own minds. So obviously, when you build a better relationship with your customer, you can start loosening up, wearing whatever you want. But just a good rule of thumb early on, keep in mind that they don't have a lot of data to go off of, and their entire paradigm, so their entire reality when it comes to you pertains to what you're wearing, or at least a large portion of it pertains to what you're wearing. So yeah, again, just to summarize, try and don't wear the exact same clothes, you don't want to be dirty, but wear the same types of things for subsequent meetings until they get to know you a lot better. Point number 2, don't contradict yourself. This has a massive impact in your customer's mind as to whether or not you're congruent. Contradicting yourself is basically showing that you're incongruent, and incongruency comes with a lot of negative aspects attached to it. So, for example, let's say you go to the customer's business or they come to yours and they bring their dog and the dog has an injured paw. Let's say you claim to care about the dog by making a face, so you frown, because claims don't just have to be verbal, they can be through body language. So you make a frown, I care about your dog. Customer then turns around and you go and boot the dog. Obviously, you don't kick your customer's dog. Let's just say you go to kick the dog, customer turns back around before you finish kicking the dog and they witness what's going on. So not only did you kick their dog, which is not a good thing, but what's worse than that is that you've become incongruent because you claimed you cared about dogs and now you have expressed that you don't. You would have been better off to say, I hate dogs, and kick the dog, because at least now they don't like that you kick the dog, but at least you're congruent. Congruency and not contradicting yourself are massive. So you never want to contradict yourself, even if there are positives attached to it. So even if you think that there's a trade-off, hey, I know I said this in the past, but if I do this now, I'm going to gain X, Y, and Z. Doesn't matter, never do it. For example, let's say that you go to meet a prospect and early on in the conversation you say that you never drink on the job. So I don't drink on the job, it's not something I do, or maybe I don't do it during the week. Let's say in this example that you just don't drink on the job. So you tell them that, fast forward a little bit, and the customer says, hey, do you want to grab a drink? This sounds like a really good opportunity. You are going to get to further build rapport. Maybe you're going to close a sale. Maybe you're going to get some referrals. And a lot of salespeople would take the customer up on this offer. Not a good idea, because although you are getting those benefits, what you are also getting thrown into the mix is the fact that you are now not congruent. Because earlier on, you said that you don't drink. And the trade-off is not worth it. That's just how important congruency is. And that's why I know a lot of guys I've worked with have lost sales and they don't understand why. Often the customer doesn't even understand why, but it's because subconsciously you have triggered the fact that you can't be trusted, and that they think to themselves, something just doesn't quite add up. This person's incongruent. That's what they're thinking in their mind. Maybe not logically, but they feel that way. So better approach to something like this in that last example is to say, hey, I'm off work in 3 hours, can I meet up with you then? Now you're going to reap the benefits of meeting up with your customer, plus you are not risking becoming incongruent. Congruency is just so powerful, and not contradicting yourself is a very good way of maintaining congruency. Contradicting yourself is probably the quickest way to break congruency, and when congruency is done, or when you can contradict yourself, you break trust, and when trust breaks, so does the sale, and often the relationship. So that is the second point I have for you guys, is to not contradict yourself. Maintain your vibe. So if you met up with your customer and you are a super positive, outgoing guy, and they love who you are, and they sign up with you next time, and you show up next time, and now you are extremely businesslike and more of an introvert, not good. I'm not saying that people can't have dynamic personalities, but what I'm saying is that your customer does not understand why you are behaving that way. So you were one way and they wanted to meet up with that person again. So they wanted to meet up with the fun, outgoing salesperson that they knew. They meet up with you, you're now quiet, you're very businesslike, you're to the point, and they start to wonder, did we do something wrong? Or who is this guy? Is he depressed now? What's going on? And you break congruency. You're now incongruent. You might be thinking, hey, earlier on you said that congruency is not being monotone or unchanging, that you can have extreme ups and downs. That is true. So if you met the first time and you were businesslike and funny and then serious and then goofy, whatever it is, then you are dynamic or whatever, and you're going to maintain that on your following meetings. But by not expressing that, again, the customer only has data that you have provided. They don't know you yet. So if you act serious during one conversation and a clown at the next, you are breaking vibe, you are becoming incongruent, and that feels like you can't be trusted. And by the way, when being funny or kidding around does not make you a clown, and clowns aren't bad. I'm not trying to say that. But anywho, make sure that you maintain the vibe. This is a big one, at least until they get to know you better. So once they really know who you are, you're able to loosen up a little bit, have good days, have bad days. But early on, people are very critical towards each other, especially a buyer towards a seller. So rule of thumb, maintain your vibe. Become self-aware. So becoming self-aware really starts with you understanding your self-image and your self-ideal, or who you are and who you want to be. If you don't know who you are and who you want to be, it's impossible to be consistent with that thing. How can you be congruent with something that you haven't yet identified? So the first step is to take time to figure out who it is that you are, what are the things that you want to work on, and more importantly, who do you aspire to be? So what is your self-ideal? This has a lot of benefits to it. It's not just in sales, and it's not just pertaining to congruency, but your entire life. Like when you start to become more self-aware and when you identify your self-ideal in your mind, a lot of things change. First of all, when your self-image starts to reflect your self-ideal, you are going to get a self-esteem boost like you have never experienced before in your life. And when your self-esteem goes up, so do your sales. They're extremely correlated. Not only that, a lot of other aspects, a lot of other relationships in your life will change. It also creates purpose. So you've probably heard before, goals, goals, goals. Goals are always stressed. I know goals are important, but in my opinion, purpose is actually more important. Goals are not the thing that will get you through those hard times. Some people think that they will, but it's not the thing, it's not the route. The route that gets you through tough times and the thing that will really get you to where you want to be in the end is your purpose. A goal without purpose is not good. If you accomplish a goal without first linking purpose to that goal, when you reach that goal, you're gonna feel empty inside. It won't matter anyway. You'll say, let's say someone has a goal to dig a hole. Okay, well, I don't have that same passion, and if I go dig, let's say the hole is like 1 kilometer deep, and I decide to take on that same goal and dig the hole that's 1 kilometer deep, I'm not gonna feel good at the end. But if somebody else who has a purpose for whatever it is to dig that kilometer deep hole, when they're done, they will feel very good. So as long as that's your actual purpose. I can't stress this enough. Like I said, I've been number one in multiple industries. I've been a top earner, and if you guys were to leave this video with anything, I would say becoming self-aware and putting the time into knowing who you are is extremely important, and identifying who you want to be. Make sure you do this. I would probably make an entire video just on talking about this. That wraps up the video. If you guys are looking for coaching or some training, you can click my email in the description below. If you like the videos and you want to subscribe, go ahead and do so. Yeah, and like I said, I hope you guys liked it. I hope that this is going to be able to actually help you guys make more sales and in the end, reach some financial goals and just bring a better overall peace into your lives. Right on.